I thought I would speak this evening about Jewish values and some of the national programs that actually fulfill or instill these values. So one Jewish value comes from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 32, which says, "You should rise before the elderly and honor the aged." From this we derive the Jewish value of kibud zakenim, which, as we learn from Talmud Tractate Kiddushin 32b, we learn that respect for the elderly applies to Torah scholars and to non-Torah scholars, to Jews and to Gentiles alike. And we have in America something called the Community Development Block Grant Program that is employed by many state and local governments to use money to fund services for poor seniors. That's where the Meals on Wheels program comes from. There's a study that showed that in the year 2015, almost 2.5 million low-income seniors availed themselves of the Meals on Wheels program that fulfills the Jewish value of kibud zakenim. We have another value in Judaism that's a value of education, and it's in the Jerusalem Talmud, Hagiga 1:7, where it says, "The real guardians of the state are the teachers." We have in Leviticus chapter 19, it says, "Lifnei iver lo titen michshol," do not place a stumbling block before a blind man. And the way that's understood is it's not necessarily talking about people who happen to be blind. It's about the sin of keeping someone deliberately ignorant, preventing them from having access to information that will protect them or help them, accomplish things in life, and preventing them from finding out the information that would allow other people to take advantage of them. That's how that value is understood. Well, in America, we have something called the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and that provides financial assistance for poor college students. There was a study recently coming out of Wisconsin that showed that 14% of community college students are homeless. So we have this responsibility to make sure that they have access to education and that they're provided for so that they can have some upward mobility. It's good for them. It's good for society. It fulfills that Jewish value. We have another Jewish value, Hakim Tikam Imo, you shall surely lift up with him. It's a law designed to encourage aid to anyone who is in distress. Whether that person's Jewish or not Jewish, whether that person is your friend or your enemy. If you see someone in distress, we have this Jewish value that you have to try to help them if you can. Well, in the United States, we have something called LIHEAP, L-I-H-E-A-P. That's the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program that helps families afford heating and cooling costs. That may not seem like such a big deal if you're just talking about adjusting the thermostat, but there are many families in America that are faced with the heat or eat choice. They have to choose whether they're going to put on the heat or whether they're going to provide sustenance for their family. In Boston, there was a study that was reported in a CNN report this week that showed a 30% increase in the number of underweight infants and toddlers during the winter months, when certain families are choosing, because they have to stay warm, they're choosing to take what little money they have and put it into the heating bills. And it unfortunately means that they may not have enough money to provide for their infants and their toddlers during the winter months. We have in Judaism the value of darchei shalom, pursuing the ways of peace. Maybe that's the value I was looking for earlier today. And that is, it has a focus on preserving societal peace, peace within society at large, and maintaining positive inter-ethnic relations. That's exactly the right value for what we were talking about earlier. And it includes directives to feed the poor of Gentiles and care for their vital needs, along with the needs of Jewish people who may be in need. It's making sure that we provide for everyone and make sure that there's positive inter-ethnic relations. In America, we have something called the 21st Century Community Learning Centers, and they provide before and after school care and summer programs for children in low-income communities. And they also receive funding through other federal resources to provide healthy snacks and meals for children who participate. For many children, that is what fulfills the critical nutritional gap for those children and what they're lacking from their homes. In Judaism, we have the Jewish value of kibud nashim, the honor of women, and that is the rabbinic value and the law designated to encourage the dignity and the honor of women. We find that in Bava Metzia 59a and Yevamot 62b. In America, we have something called the Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children. That's the WIC program, and that supports pregnant, postpartum, and nursing women and helps young children have their nutritional needs met at critical points in their development. We have in Judaism the Jewish value of umot ha'olam, the value of taking into consideration that we're not the only nation in the world, but there are other nations in the world. It's a set of principles requiring care and respect of Gentiles, especially those who are vulnerable or in need. We find this in Kiddushin 33a, Psachim 113b, and Brachot 17a. In the United States, we have something called the McGovern Dole International Food for Education Program, which promotes both nutrition and school enrollment and advancement in developing countries by providing meals in schools in developing countries. Just last week, actually, the United Nations humanitarian chief announced that the world is facing the largest threat of famine since 1945. And that kind is only declared when at least 30% of a population is acutely malnourished, and 2 adults or 4 children per every 10,000 people are dying each day. We have in Judaism the value of Anye Irecha Kadmin. The local poor are a priority. It's a concept that when you're giving tzedakah, you have to think locally first and then go from there. So you start with your own family. If there's people in your family that are really in need, you have to provide for them. Then you have to provide for people in your local neighborhood, and then in your town, your city, your state, your country, the world. And that's a way of making sure that everyone's needs are met. We find that described in Bava Metzia 71a. And the way that it's understood, it's that you take care, it's think globally, act locally, basically. We have in America something called the CSBG, that's the Community Services Block Grant, which provides a range of services in partnership with community-based organizations, including emergency food assistance through food banks. We have in Judaism a value, ahavat ger, the love, the requirement to love the stranger in your midst. And that's a series of laws, really, insisting on compassionate behavior towards strangers, having empathy for foreigners and refugees who live amongst us, and to make sure that they're included in every aspect of society. We find this in the book of Exodus, chapter 22 and 23, Deuteronomy, chapter 16, and various tractates of the Talmud. There's a program called Choice Neighborhoods in America that takes a community-driven approach to revitalizing neighborhoods with public housing. That may not sound like such a big deal, but it's a holistic strategy that's in contrast to earlier efforts that would isolate public housing from community resources and services and attempts to fully integrate the families into the community. The goal is actually now to integrate families into the community, and Choice Neighborhoods takes that as one of their chief priorities. We have one of the most famous Jewish values, tzedek, tzedek tirdov, justice, justice shall you pursue. And that is the obligation to actively, with our lives, with everything that we do, actively to promote justice. We find that in Leviticus 19:36, Deuteronomy 16:20, Zechariah 8:16, Masachet Avot 1:18. In America, we have something called the Legal Services Corporation that provides funding for legal aid groups to support the low-income households in civil cases, such as securing restraining orders for victims of domestic abuse and helping homeowners prevent foreclosure. These legal services bolster families who otherwise have limited protection during incredibly destabilizing events. The second to last Jewish value I'll mention is Bakesh Shalom V'rodfehu, to seek peace and to pursue it. That's the obligation to actively reduce conflicts. A series of laws and ethical teachings advocating peace, conflict resolution methodologies, and prohibiting violence against the innocent. We find this in Psalm 34:15 and various tractates of the Talmud. In America, we have something called the Corporation for National and Community Service, which includes programs like AmeriCorps and provides service and volunteering opportunities in support of community needs. The last Jewish value that I'm going to mention is Hocheach Tochiach. That the commandment, thou shalt rebuke, not indiscriminately, but when it's appropriate. It's the obligation to be a social critic when you see that society or individuals are making terrible mistakes. Such criticism is viewed as an expression of care for others. We find it in Leviticus 19:17, Genesis Rabbah 54. When I think of this value, Hocheach Tochiach, you shall rebuke. And I think about these very important programs, such as the Legal Services Corporation and Choice Neighborhoods and the Community Services Block Grant and the McGovern Dole International Food for Education Program and the WIC program and the 21st Century Community Learning Centers and the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, and the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and the Community Development Block Grant Program, all of which would be absolutely gutted and destroyed by the government recently proposed. I think we have an obligation, Hocheach Tochiach, to rebuke that kind of a budget that would totally eviscerate these services that provide for the most needy people in our society. I mean, the very essence of the United States, the very fabric of this country has always been to provide for people and to make sure that their basic needs are being met. And if we were to take that money, eviscerate those programs, take that away from people, it would destroy people's lives. And we have a responsibility, Hocheach Tochiach, to rebuke when we see something like that happening. Our responsibility as Jewish people is to live up to the greatest values of Judaism. And those values, the most important values that we have, are those values that provide for the widow, the orphan, the needy, and the stranger amongst us. Ken Yehi Ratzon.